Hey, how are you? So I'm putting together the video for the Yamaha 540 rebuild. This has been the longest project running, just on how long it took us to get together. So we did a horrible job filming it, obviously. So the video, you're gonna notice the clips are really sparse. I'm probably gonna bring it back here often to talk about things. And this first one, like, all we have for the teardown is a few time lapses, which are all very bad. We did a horrible job filming it. But I'll just talk you through it. It's very simple. It's just removing bolts, essentially, and pulling the engine out. So let's go ahead and go over that quickly. So the first thing is taking off the hood, taking off the exhaust, and then you'll see that I took off the oil pan and then the air box. Well, I don't take the air box out here. Taking off the air box is a lot easier if you take off the paneling, which involves taking off the seat, which we do end up doing. I don't film it, but there's just some bolts here. We take the seat off, take off these plastics because I want to take out the gas tank, obviously, and clean it out, make sure I get all the crud out of the gas tank, because it's probably never been done. And we do that later on. I actually did that like after the engine was rebuilt. But you just see, like, I'm taking off all the belts around the carburetor, etc. And to get out the carburetor and take off the intake. And the whole time Brad's on the other side trying to work how we're going to get the clutch off. So we turned it on its side, and we started pouring oil in and running in a bolt. I don't have the measurement of the bolt, but this is a pretty common technique. It'd be really easy to look up what size that bolt is, which is exactly what we did. We just Googled the size of the bolt. And we ran it in, and running the bolt in when it's filled with oil, it pushes pressure behind the clutch and it slides it off. Now this is really easy with an impact, and I don't know if we have footage of it, but later on we did buy an impact and an electric impact. We have a pneumatic one, but now that we have an impact, it works like first try right off the bat, no problem. If you're doing it by hand, you need to get a really good seal. So what we ended up doing is putting Teflon tape on, and a lot of Teflon tape on, and you need to make sure the bolt's clean, like really clean, when you put the Teflon tape on. And that'll create a nice tight seal, and then I'll pop the clutch off. And then we just pulled the engine out and started doing a tear down. I don't have any footage of that. But, you know, it's just taking bolts off. Take bolts off, take it apart, keep track of everything. We used bags and boxes just to keep everything somewhat together. And when we come back into the footage, I'll be sitting at the table with a torn down engine. And we're going to come up to the first fatal flaw in the engine. So let's go back in. Oh, we're filming. So first ram is 13 Newton meters. So we've assembled, and we're gonna put it back together now. The general idea. We replaced the magneto end bearing and the two bearings on the clutch, on the primary clutch end, but because we're broke, we didn't send it off to be split and replace the middle ones, because, oh boy, that's a lot of money. Who's got that kind of money? And did you look up, like, how much of this shit needs to go on? Nope. I feel like it's a very fine layer. Yeah. Like, yeah.
And you know, it worked without any, so there's that to consider.
Okay, Brad's comment about the engine, that it ran without any sealant. So like around the outside, all around the outside of this bottom around the crankcase needs to be sealed. When we disassembled this engine, there was nothing. It was just steel on steel. It either rotted away and got sucked in from the vacuum, or whoever put it together last, because it has been rebuilt in the past, and we knew that because when we took it apart, it had 2 pistons that weren't matching. Both were in really rough shape. One was cracked, so that's why we ended up ordering new pistons. The bearings were all original, but they were done. Like, they were wiggling all over the place. They were really bad shape, but only the ones on the outside, which is why those were the ones we replaced. In the video we said we didn't replace the middle ones because we're poor, which is true, but they are still good. They were still solid bearings, which sort of makes sense because they're on the middle, and any like shaking is gonna it's gonna affect the exterior bearings the most anyways. We were able to get the exterior bearings off with clutch pullers. We ordered a special clutch puller that were long enough, and they're cups. Yeah, they're cups. So they're like these cups that slide in on either side of the bearing, and they're sort of wedged, and they wedge the bearing off of the crank, because the one on the far side near where I'm sitting, that one was able to get off with a normal clutch puller, but the other ones, they're so tight with the crank that you can't get the teeth for the clutch puller in between, so you have to buy these cups that like wedge themselves in, and they the bearing off the crank. So that's how we did that. But yeah, this engine was in really rough shape. Like, we were really surprised that it was actually running at all. All the gaskets were gone. Like, it must have just been like just sucking in so much air. It must have been running super duper lean. So it's surprising that it lasted as long as it did without just going nuclear. But yeah, that reminded me of that. So now we'll go back. This doesn't need to be on when we torque it on, right? Because it'll just slide in.
Yeah, it just slides in. This guy said
Oh, also we have a bunch of heaters around to get it up to heat so that the sealant will actually cure.
Because the old stone house that we're in right now is kind of cold, the stone really holds on to that cold.
Are you gonna do that? How much did that cost?
I don't remember, I bought it like so many months ago. Probably $12 for the tube.
Are you gonna be able to like close it off so that we can reuse it at some point? It's got a lid there.
Yep.
Very good.
And this is the high temp copper sealer.
The end of the tube yet. Pretty. Where did you read that this was recommended? On the tube? That's what he said to use? Is it what they use for the intake on the engines or cars?
No, this is high temp stuff.
How long does it take to cure?
Wasn't it like 15 minutes?
I don't know, but I'm just asking because that means you have to get the whole thing done before it cures.
Since you're doing the pour, I will also let you do the drop. That's the rule, right? That's the roadkill rule. Ouch. Looks good. I like that it's orange. Orange means fast, right?
Orange means fast. It's at least 10 extra horsepower.
Well, considering it used to run without any, you know, a good seal is a good thing.
This is definitely easier than an intake because there's those guidance pins.
Wow, that really looks pretty. There's just the slightest amount of squeeze out, which means I got good coverage, but not too much, where we'll have stuff floating around in our engine. I think that's for mounting.
The other thing we should point out is that we like thoroughly degreased it and everything so that everything would cure really good and everything would stick. The whole inside's obviously covered in oil, but we made sure all the mating surfaces were nice and cleaned up.
Also remember when I originally took these bolts out, I believe I ran them through on the wire wheel.
Okay, so the general rule of torquing down anything with the engine is inside.
Like all mating surfaces, so say a cylinder head on an engine, the intake, anything you think that has many bolts spread across a large area, you always start in the center and work your way out to keep it from warping and giving you issues later on.
Is there any, were these all the same way?
Not positive. Pretty sure they were all the same.
Wrong.
This one's a long one. This far one back here.
Okay, just send her home with the impact.
Okay, so when I'm doing this, I'm just like doing it really slowly. I'm going through the same pattern, but I'm not going fully to torque spec. Even by manual, there's two torques. So there's an initial torque, which I'm going through right now, and then there's a final torque, which I do later. And I just follow the same pattern over and over, but I might have done like 3 or 4 passes, just gradually going up, not even going to the torque specs because I'm a little overcautious. But in general, I did next pattern in the middle, and then I just moved outwards, and whenever there's a grouping of bolts, I do still stick with an X pattern to spread out the changes in torque.
Okay, that's first torque done.
Second torque, 21 Newton meters.
As it turns out, I was really approaching the torque. Is that a different size? That's great. I was probably doing it wrong the entire time.
So on the cover of the title, this Sam you know, we're all laughing our heads off. Did you have to borrow a reindeer to get down here? I'm back. Jack, I get more action in a week than you've had in your entire life. I've got houses in LA, Paris, and Vail. Each one of them is 70-inch plasma screen. So I suggest you wipe that stupid smile off your face.
That's precision! Oh, that is pretty.
And that was the end of my excitement, because if you pay really close attention here, you're gonna see our grand oversight in putting this engine back together.
Uh-oh. That's not good. It doesn't spin at all. Great. What do you think the problem is?
Oh, I don't know.
Bearings?
What?
Bearings weren't in right.
Oh, I'm afraid that it got untrued.
Right.
Something grinds right there. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And it's stuck.
Getting easier.
So there's something in there.
Wrong.
It's gone. Oh, it's back.
I'm worried we're gonna have to take it apart and clean it up again.
Right.
Yep. That's all I can think of. Like,
So that's where we stopped. I stopped the camera. We kept trying to diagnose the problem, and what we noticed was when we turned the crank, the one end you would see rotating, which meant the crank wasn't straight anymore. It's just ironic because we didn't have the crank taken apart because we didn't want to pay to have it straightened, and now we would have to pay to get it straightened. The great thing is the machinist that we paid to machine the cylinders, he was willing to give it a try at straightening the crank. He didn't have the proper tools, but he does have much more precision tools than we do, and he was able to actually knock the crank straight, both using his lathe, and he has perfectly machined flat surfaces that he was able to use to both inspect but also just knock the crank back to the point that it is perfectly straight. This is where I'm going to leave this video. I'm going to make this a part 1 because I'm already at 20 minutes. But that's where the project ends for quite some time until we were able to get the crank straight. Part 2 I will post ASAP, and that's when we'll go over what we had to do to make the changes. I don't refilm the putting together. It's the exact same as what we just did. So yeah, see you in part 2.